To President Trump after the president threatened to close the government last night to make sure that the wall is built.
I don't think a government shutdown is necessary, and I don't think people want to see a government shutdown, ourselves included.
Out front now, Republican Congressman from Iowa, Steve King. Congressman King, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tim.
As you know, President Trump said last night that he's willing to shut the government down if that's what it takes to build his border wall. Your own leader in the House, Paul Ryan, he says that's not necessary and, in fact, not in the party's interest to do so. Who's right?
Well, I agree with both of them. And I know that Paul Ryan and I had this discussion back in January, and the discussion was about the president we need to provide the president the resources he needs to secure the border. That said to me, resources to build the wall as well as to enforce the law. And when the president says he will deal with a government shutdown if necessary, I don't think it'll be necessary. And I think that's what Paul Ryan is saying. It won't be necessary. We'll get those resources to the president's desk. But if the Democrats are able to obstruct this and find a way to shut the government down over it, and I'm not sure that they can do that, but if they can find that way to do that, the public won't tolerate a government shutdown over denying a mandate from the American people that was delivered with the election of Donald Trump. So we need to follow through on this, and I think Republicans will come in line, and I don't know that Democrats will, but historically they have voted also for building a wall and a fence on the southern border.
As you know, Donald Trump during the campaign did not think a shutdown was a good thing at all for a president. Back in 2013, he tweeted, and I'm quoting here, "My sense is that people are far angrier at the president than they are at Congress. RE, the shutdown, an interesting turn." That's a tweet. Listen to what else he had to say at the time.
Nobody wants a shutdown.
Whether there's a shutdown, who knows? That would be horrible if it was. I really think the pressure is on Obama to make a deal because he doesn't want this in his resume.
Isn't the president now on President Trump to make a deal?
Well, I think President Trump has sent a good message to the Congress, and that is, I'm going to insist that I get the $1.6 billion to start the construction on the wall on the southern border. And that's a presidential promise. If he's not willing to demand that funding, then he's not following through with the impetus of the dedication and the commitment that he's made.
Yeah, but
I think it's a good tactical maneuver.
Border wall, which many, even Republican congressmen and representatives who live along the border don't believe is necessary, Will Hurd among them, is that worth it to fill a campaign promise, worth shutting down the entire government and all the other budget priorities that your own party has?
Well, imagine this. I mean, let's just imagine the sequence of this would come about in this way if there was going to be a shutdown. An appropriation bill would be started in the House, sent to the Senate, to the President, and if the President said the money's not in here that I insisted on, I'm going to veto this bill, now go back to work and get me a bill with the funding in it. That's the cycle of it. So it would actually be the willful function of Congress that refused to fund something that the President demanded. Then we'd figure out who's going to blink. Is the President going to blink or is the Congress going to blink? And I will say, we already know that Congress is going to blink because they blinked in 2013 over a much higher principle than this. We also know that Democrats were ready to shut the government down if they didn't get the $500 million in funding for Planned Parenthood. So if you look at the value of the principles here involved, I think the result of this is already known. Is there's going to be funding for the president, $1.6 billion in that budget, and the only thing that keeps that from happening, practically speaking, is if the president doesn't insist. I think he will. I think he's given his word. We've got to get started building that wall, and I'm going to have to convince Will Hurd that it's a good idea.
On another topic, CNN has confirmed that the White House has now prepared paperwork to pardon the former Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Trump last night even suggested that he's going to make it happen. I just want to be clear, remind our viewers, a judge found that Arpaio's office engaged in systematic racial profiling of Latinos, ordered him to stop detaining people based only on suspicion of being undocumented immigrants. And despite that judicial order, Arpaio was then found guilty of criminal contempt for not following it. Is this someone, in your view, who deserves a presidential pardon?
I believe so. And I say this because I sat on the Judiciary Committee and I've been down to Maricopa County. I visited with Sheriff Arpaio some years ago, but I watched as this political prosecution was put together when the Democrats were in the majority. And they didn't like the idea that he was enforcing immigration law. So at this case,
but it was a judge
pick it apart piece by
who
piece.
declared him in contempt. It wasn't Democrats in Congress. It was a judge that declared him in contempt of the ruling.
Well, and judges aren't perfect either, and judges have a political agenda too. The chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee went to the floor of the Senate about 6 months ago and gave a little lecture to Chief Justice Roberts that said, if you're concerned about our confirmations being political, stop making political decisions with your court, and our confirmations will no longer be political either. We've got a politicized court, and a lot of Obama appointees have been political, and it's also the case for a number of others.
You are close with Steve Bannon, President Trump's now former strategist. The day he was fired, he gave a very interesting interview to the Weekly Standard, and he said, quote, quite explosive words, he said that the Trump presidency that we fought for and won is over. We still have a huge movement, and we will make something of the Trump presidency, but that presidency is over. It will be something else, and there will be all kinds of fights, and there will be good days and bad days, but that presidency is over. That's a remarkable charge to make for Bannon as he goes out the door. Do you agree with him that presidency, that agenda, in effect, that Trump voters elected him to enact, that's over?
Well, even if I had a suspicion that it is, it's my job and my commitment to continue to push the agenda that are the convictions that I believe in and I promised my constituents that I would promote. And a lot of that is wrapped up in the Trump agenda. I wanted that platform in the Oval Office. The American people came together and elected a conservative platform with border security in it into the Oval Office, and Mike Pence is a component of this as well. I think that might have caught Steve Bannon on a bit of a pessimistic day. I have not talked to him directly about that quote, but I've spoken with him since then, and I know that he's committed to the Trump agenda and the platform, and he's not going to let up. I'm hopeful the president won't let up, and I don't intend to let up. He had two big whiteboards on that war room office of his in the West Wing, in Steve Bannon's office, and on it were the list of all of the Trump promises, and those that were completed, he put a check mark behind. And I think Steve Bannon is going to continue to promote that agenda that is the Trump agenda, and I think the president will follow through on most of those as well. I've got some concerns, but I think the president needs help on this wall, and I think that he should have an individual who would be responsible for the full package of the wall, the strategy, the political strategy, the engineering, the funding, all the pieces. And I don't know that the president